All right. So we're at 14A4. 14A4, and we have one last section dealing with Chana. Chana was, as we recall, Samuel's mother. Like many biblical heroines before her, she originally was barren. She had no children. She wanted to have children and did not have children. And then finally, she prays to God, and God answers her prayer, and she has the baby Samuel, who becomes, of course, one of the major spiritual leaders of the Jewish people. So, so now we're up to, and this is at the beginning of the second book of Samuel. I just want to check one thing because I want to make sure this is right. So she prays to God for a son, and then she is answered, and she had made a pledge to God that if you do give me a son, then I will give him back to you, and he will be devoted, his life will be devoted to serving you. And that's what happens with Samuel. So she has a baby. She takes care of the baby until the baby is weaned, and then she has to bring the baby to the tabernacle, to the Mishkan, and she then offers her second prayer. And this is now where we are to look at the second prayer that she said, that she recited, and specifically one of the phrases that she meant, that she says. They already proved that she's a prophetess. She's one of the 7 women who were prophets. We're at 14A4, and we're at the second line at the top of the page. The Gemara digresses. So Bill is not with us this morning. He's been our designated reader for a long time. We need somebody to do the honor of reading for us, please. Thank you, Stuart.
Gemara digresses to expound on part of Hannah's prayer. There is none holy like God, for there is none besides you. Rav Yehuda bar Menashe said, do not read this word as biltecha, which means beside you. Rather read it as levalosecha.
All right, or in our pronunciation, levalotecha.
Levalotecha, which means to survive you. For the nature of the Holy One, blessed is he, is not like the nature of man. The nature of man is such that the work of his hands outlives him. But the Holy One, blessed is he, outlives the work of his hands.
Okay, so this is a comparison, the difference between the human being and the Holy Blessed One. So this first one is saying not simply that God, you're so unique, there's no one like you. That's the simple reading of the Hebrew. But what this sage says is, well, let's appreciate some of the uniqueness of God. What is it about God that's different from all of all the other creatures? So, and implicit in this paragraph and in the next paragraph is that we're in God's image, right? So we are blessed and bestowed with many gifts and powers, capabilities that we could consider godly. For instance, philosophers, like Maimonides would say, what does it mean we're in God's image? We have rational powers of thought. We have an intellect, just like God. But then, of course, the question would be, so then what's the difference between God's intellect and our intellect? Right? So that's the chain of thinking. If we're just like God in many ways, then in what way do we share capabilities with God, and in what ways are we not like God? So this statement is saying we can be creative, right? We are creative. God creates things, we create things. One of the things that we create, for instance, is children. We create children in our image, which is, that's, at the beginning of Genesis, it says Adam and Eve, who are created in God's image, then have children who they create in their image. So we're very much like God in that kind of way, and yet we're not. So here we have, this is Rabbi Yehuda ben Menashe, who says a key difference, and of course there's always an exception, and with Adam and Eve there was an exception as well. A key difference is that the natural order of things is based on the idea that one generation goes and the next generation takes over, right? That we replace ourselves. We start something going, and then we conk out, and whatever it is that we have survives us. So this is in the nature of things. Of course, as I say, there are tragic exceptions, but we consider them tragic. The younger generation lives beyond the older generation. The older generation, that's their job. Their job is to make room for the younger generation and get out of the way. Or think of other kinds of creation. Rembrandt creates a painting. The Rembrandt is, up there for people to look at hundreds and hundreds of years later. Rembrandt is not around, right? Rembrandt is done. He did his job. He created his work, and then he disappears, right? There's that joke. Where's Beethoven these days? He's decomposing in the grave, right? Get it? So Beethoven creates his works, and then he's gone, and all we have is the works that survive him. So here, what we have, though, says Rabbi Yehuda ben Menashe, is that's one of the distinctions between us and God. God as creator is above and beyond the creatures and the creations that issue from God. God doesn't set things in motion and then disappear or decompose or die, right? Everything that is created by God is temporary and finite, and God is enduring, eternal, and infinite. So that's the way he's reading that. That's a key distinction in the power of creation. And of course, philosophically, that distinction points to, a powerful distinction about what the notion of, when we use the word creation, we're really, as Maimonides said many times, we're using words for both situations, but the words end up having very different meanings. When we apply them to God rather than applying them to human beings. Okay, so that's this first thing. Yeah, Stuart.
I mean, it just seems like implicit here is a conception that when creation is over, that God steps back and doesn't intervene in man's affairs going forward, although except he sometimes does.
Well, I think it's actually not implicit. I think it's the opposite. I think, we would we know of a kind of deistic idea that God sets the world in motion, and then the world takes care of itself. And do we even think that God cares about the world? And I think that the implicit message here is the opposite. Without God, everything that God creates would fall apart. And there would be no future. It's not like God has created an eternally regenerative reality. That's what this Rabbi Yehuda ben Menashe is saying. No, everything will use itself up, will wither away, but not God. And if it doesn't, it's because there is a sustaining input of divine creativity and energy again and again. What we say in our traditional morning prayers, Hamachadesh b'tuvo b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh reshis. God renews in God's goodness every day the work of creation. That the sun shines this morning, we wake up, oh, thank you, God, for giving me back my soul. This is a renewal. This is not ho-hum. That's the difference between the Ecclesiastes attitude and the traditional attitude. The Ecclesiastes attitude is, it's the same thing. It's just going to always happen. There's nothing new. It's just keeping on going. Mm-hmm. And the religious attitude of our tradition is, this is amazing. This is a wonder. The fact that it's again happening is not to be taken for granted. So I think that's the underlying assumption that follows from the distinction that he's making. Okay, and now we have another even more explicit distinction about creativity. Hannah's prayers continue.
Hannah's prayer continues, and there is no rock like our God. The Gemara interprets, there is no artist like our God.
So this is a play on words again, just like in the first one, the play on words was made explicit. The word is biltecha, and then they turned it into levalotcha, right? So that's changing the pronunciation of the letters. Here, the words are ve'ein tzur kelokeinu. There is no rock like our Almighty God. We say that God is Tzur Yisrael, Kuma Be'ezrat Yisrael. We sing at the beginning, to introduce the Amid, that God is the rock of Israel, Tzur. So God is powerful, God is steadfast. All of the different associations that you want to have with the word rock is fine. It's what's the prudential, right? Prudential, that's the rock of Gibraltar, right? Put your trust in the rock. So that's the image of Tzur. And we have it, for instance, in Moses' last prayer, that he uses the word Tzur again and again. God is a Tzur. And even though God is a Tzur, God brings honey out of the rock, right? Water out of the rock, and so on and so forth. But it's still, this is a rock. So, however, here, the teaching says, don't read Tzur, read Tzayar. Tzayar means a former or an artist, someone who makes shapes, who makes forms, right? In modern Hebrew, a tzayar is a painter. So a tzur also, it comes from this idea that a tzur is this rock shape, this form that's not going to change, at least not obviously within our own observation of it. It takes thousands of years for the rock to erode. So we see this rock as an enduring shape. A tzayar, someone who makes forms, who makes shapes. So now we have this active idea of the shape maker, the artist. God is a great artist. There is no artist that can compare to God. Okay, how so?
For a person draws a figure on a wall and is unable to endow it with breath, soul, internal parts, and intestines. But the Holy One, blessed is he, shapes a form inside another form. That is, he creates a child inside the mother and endows it with breath, soul, internal parts, and intestines.
Okay, so this is the idea of, and this midrash is found in various forms, take the word form, in different parts of our tradition. It happens to be something that I personally, in my own life, have found very meaningful over the years. And the words in Hebrew, Adam Tsar Surah, right? That's this idea of a tzayar, right? And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Tsar Surah Betoch Surah. God makes a form within a form. In other words, and in other places, what we have is expansion. For instance, take and the context, of course, is we're living at a time when we've had exposure to classical civilization. We fight against the statues. The Hanukkah story is going to come up soon. We didn't want statues to be installed into our temple. We found that to be idolatry, right? The Torah says, don't do that. What's the big deal? The answer is those are dead forms, and we are live forms. And how do we differentiate between live and dead? A dead form is, for instance, you have a statue of Apollo or something like that. It's amazing. It's beautiful. Remember that, and back in the old days, they actually painted them. They weren't just like, white or just bronze or something. They were painted. So the eyes had lively colors, and the skin and the whole thing. They look just like people, except that inside they're hollow. Inside, it's a surface similarity, but inside there's nothing, right? If it's a it's marble all the way through, or if it's metal, it's actually hollow, because you can't have metal and be light enough to move from one place to another. So they create the molds, and there's all that technical sophistication of how to create these statues. So on the one hand, they're really superficially, literally superficially amazing, but there's no there. There's nothing inside. And what this is saying is, look, we've got that same superficial quality. We've got the eyes and the hair and the muscles and the blah, blah, blah. And then guess what? We've got a heart inside that's also beating, that's its own form. And we've got a soul that's this animating force within all of these forms, one inside the other, inside the other. That's what God does, right?
But the biblical understanding is that we shouldn't make graven images of God, not of human beings. And yet it seems like
not clear.
Okay, because it seems like here they're blurring the lines and saying, right, because Apollo is a god, so you wouldn't want to make an image of him. But if you make an image of a human being, the way a Rembrandt does, then it seems like
right. So so we're mixing all kinds of cultures and all kinds of historical periods. So for instance, a lot of the Roman statues, an Olympic champion was a human being, but then was deified. So the line between a human being and a god was very porous.
But what makes Rembrandt so remarkable is that he's painting a man, right? He's painting himself. He's painting his neighbor, and he so endows it with such. It's like a miracle that he endows it, and hundreds of years later, it still is living. Right, it's almost living. Right.
So So this is, they're talking within their particular thing, but yes, absolutely. And that's what we are amazed about, is like, how did he get that life, that spark of soul in the in the image? The Baal Shem Tov is reported to have said that, what does it mean that there is no artist like God? Because when we see a Rembrandt, we go, wow, it's so lifelike, it's so amazing. And when we see the world, we go, wow, it's so lifelike. It really, and that's God fooling us. The whole world is basically trompe-l'oeil. The whole world is basically one big gigantic fooling of the eye. So even better than Rembrandt. So, that's the derivative quality, right? Rembrandt's work is amazing because it looks like something else. It reminds us of something else. And the Baal Shem Tov says, yeah. And then when we look at the rest of the world, we're so fooled. We think it really is what it is. And it's really a reflection of a spiritual reality that goes back to God. Geraldine.
Many years ago, I was at a fundraiser party for my school, and there was an artist in town who was drawing caricatures of people. And she drew a caricature of a person who is my dearest, one of my best friends. And the caricature was good, but it wasn't she.
Phew. All
No,
right.
but that's the difference. It's
Right. So, right. So to expand beyond that, whatever it is, even the most skillful artists, when we say, oh, you captured that person so
Yeah.
well, or you captured their
Yeah.
essence or something, but it's still partial.
Mhm.
It's never everything by definition, right? And that's what the Baal Shem Tov was saying in the end. What God is doing, God captures, me, my essence, my non-essence, the stuff that I wish nobody else did capture, and God captures all of it, right? It's all one big gigantic package. So Ein Tzayar Kelokim. There is no creative artist like God. She is saying this, of course, because she has participated in the miracle of creating life. And that miracle is, again, an endowed gift by God to us. I want you to be a little bit like me, right? I want you to be able to create life the way I have created life. I want human beings to be able to make more life in the world. Okay. Now we go on to the next example of one of the 7 women in Jewish history who are credited with being a prophet. And this is Abigail. Okay, so who was Abigail? Abigail was the wife of a man named Naval. And Naval was a rich rancher, farmer, landowner. And when early in David's career, when he's running away from Saul, he had his ragtag militia that he was in charge of, and they had to be on the lam all the time because Saul was after him, and that meant that they really needed to. They couldn't settle down any place. They needed to get provisions. They needed to get supplies wherever they ended up being. So the story that we have at the beginning of the book of Samuel is that he's running away from Saul, and he knows that Naval is a very prosperous person who has plenty. If he wants to, he can give David and his men food and provisions. And Naval turns them down. He sends a mission. He sends a bunch of people over to Naval, asking him to do that. And Naval says, "Get out of here. I have no time for you." So then Abigail, who is Naval's wife, hears that this is what happens, and she gets nervous because David was, what did I just say? Like a head of a militia, of an armed gang. He was a gangster. He was a rebel, and he was not so gentle with people that were giving him trouble. So she's now worried that her smug husband has dug his own grave, and by turning David down. So I'm going to read to you this section of the story, because then we'll see what the Talmud does with it. Okay. So this is 1 Samuel chapter 25, and I'm going to start from verse 18. So Abigail quickly got together 200 loaves of bread, 2 jars of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of parched corn, 100 cakes of raisin, and 200 cakes of pressed figs. She loaded them on asses, and she told her young men, "Go on ahead of me, and I'll follow you." But she did not tell her husband Naval. So she's doing an end run around Naval. She's secretly going to give provisions to David and all of his men. And you see that it requires a lot of stuff. So she says, "Send this on ahead. I'll be on my way." And she doesn't tell her husband. She was riding on the ass and going down a trail on the hill when David and his men appeared, coming down toward her, and she met them. Now, David had been saying, It was all for nothing that I protected that fellow's possessions in the wilderness, and that nothing he owned is missing. He has paid me back evil for good, right? So I've been running this protection for him, and he doesn't want to help me out at all. So it was nothing. May God do such and such to the enemies of David if, which is a euphemistic way of saying, I swear, if by the light of morning I leave a single male of his. He's going to wipe them all out, right? So he's really ticked off that Nabal has turned him down. When Abigail saw David, she quickly dismounted from the ass and threw herself face down before David, bowing to the ground. Prostrate at his feet, she pleaded, let the blame be mine, my lord, but let your handmaid speak to you. Hear your maid's plea. Please, my lord, pay no attention to that wretched fellow Nabal. That's her husband, right? For he is just what his name says. The word Nabal means a scoundrel, means a bum. So Kishmo Kenhu. His name means boor, and he is a boor. Your handmaid did not see the young men whom my lord sent, right? Those are the group that came asking for help. I swear, my lord, as the Lord lives and as you live, the Lord who has kept you from seeking redress by blood with your own hands, let your enemies and all who would harm my lord fare like Nabal. Here is the present which your maidservant has brought to my lord. Let it be given to the young men who are the followers of my lord. Please pardon your maid's boldness, for the Lord will grant my lord an enduring house, because my lord is fighting the battles of the Lord, capital L, and no wrong is ever to be found in you. And if anyone sets out to pursue you and seek your life, the life of my lord will be bound up in the bundle of life in the care of the Lord, capital L. But God will fling away the lives of your enemies as from the hollow of a sling, right? So she's first of all giving him a lot of stuff. She says, you know, it's not my fault. I didn't know that you were asking for stuff. Otherwise you would have had it right away. Let all your enemies perish. My husband is an idiot and no good. And when the Lord has accomplished for my Lord, all Lord, capital L, my Lord, small l, all the good that God has promised you and has appointed you ruler of Israel, when you finally become ruler of Israel, do not let this be a cause of stumbling and of faltering courage to my Lord, that you have shed blood needlessly, and that my Lord sought redress with his own hands. And when the Lord has prospered my Lord, when the Lord, capital L, has prospered my Lord, David, remember your maid. Okay. Then David said to Abigail, praise be the Lord God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me, and blessed be your prudence. Blessed be you yourself for restraining me from seeking redress in blood by my own hands. For as sure as the Lord God of Israel lives, who has kept me from harming you, had you not come quickly to meet me, not a single male of Nabal's line would have been left by daybreak. David then accepted from her what she had brought him, and he said to her, go up to your home safely. See, I have heeded your plea and respected your wish. Okay, so that's the encounter between Abigail and David. I read it quickly. We don't have time to look at it, dwell at it in detail, but there are a couple of elements to this that we will see that the Talmud works with, right? Clearly, like she says, she's doing this in secret. So she's doing this behind her husband's back. She's coming to David and she's giving him all these gifts. What else do we feel is going on between the two of them? What is Abigail saying to him, you know, in her long speech? You know, we could have imagined her saying, look, spare my husband. He didn't mean any harm. Here's the gift. And, you know, thank you. Be well. Good luck. Goodbye. But she goes beyond that, right? She does more than that. She promises David that he's going to succeed. He's going to be king of Israel. And remember me when you are, you know, king of Israel. And she basically, you know, says that her husband is a schmo, right? So there's a little, you know, underlying question about what else is going on here. what is the emotional, even erotic, I would say, dynamic that's going on between Abigail and David. Let me tell you that later on, Naval dies and David marries Abigail. Okay, surprise. So that's in short, without doing it full justice, that's the story that we have. And now we're going to see the Gemara obviously knows everything plus more, and we'll see how they read some of these statements back and forth. Yeah, David.
What she says with confidence and prophecy, really.
Right. So going back to the question, how do we know she's a prophet, right? So it's not quite sure. We could read it much more skeptically, that she's just trying to be desperate. She's trying to, she's trying to, get him to go away. So she's trying to, be, a little bit of a flatterer. She's trying to get on his good side. She's just trying to buy him off. She's trying to buy him off both with a lot of sheep and cakes of goodies, and also with very sweet words, right? Is she using some of her feminine charm to sort of like soften him up, and which women know, for better and for worse, is sometimes one of the weapons that they have to use, and for worse, in the sense that that's unfortunately a very ugly element of the world that sometimes we know about. Sylvia.
You could take a cynical point of view too on what she's doing. The initial question is, she says her husband is awful. Is she doing that to protect him, or is she perhaps doing that to protect her future legacy as his widow and acquire the wealth that perhaps he had?
Right.
Position and yes, the prophecy of David, I know you're going to be king of Israel and more than that. That's a different side of her, but
right.
You wonder what's really going on, why she's doing this.
Right, exactly. So is she ingratiating herself just for the economics of it, to protect her own estate, her own stature in that estate for later? Is there anything else beyond that? And of course, all of those things, that's what makes good movies, right? That's all of these things are sort of like hanging in the air, and the ambiguity of it. And it's not always clear that people know how much they're getting into, right? So when they do it, okay.
There's kind of a parallel to Esther too, right? I mean, Esther has a husband who's not exactly an ideal citizen, and
he doesn't have to be a citizen. He's the king.
What's that?
He doesn't have to be a citizen. He's the king.
He's the king. But I mean, she's sort of ashamed of him, or she has to navigate his.
Yeah, I mean, except that there's no other here. There's real fear. I mean, her husband here is
right.
under threat by this murderous, gangster. So there's, with Esther, it's different. The threat is not on her husband at all, right? The threat is from her husband. That is, her husband is authorizing the extermination of the Jewish people. So, yeah.
And the other thing is, you get the impression of a very assertive, aggressive woman.
Yes.
She puts herself in front of David, wanting to be David's wife, I think, ultimately.
That's one of the implications for sure. That's one of the things. So let's see now what the Talmud does. So now a proof that Abigail was a prophetess. Back to you, Stuart.
Abigail, as it is written, and she was riding on the donkey and came down by the covert side of the mountain that stood in Shiloh.
Okay, wait a second. You have that? Look at that. Good. I don't have that. The business.
What now?
Okay.
You went the other way around.
Yeah, I went the other way around. That's not, you went backwards.
Oh,
Stuart,
sorry.
you went backwards.
Okay.
Yes, correct.
I'm reading right to left. Okay, now.
Yeah, now we're at
why does
14A.
Scripture use the expression?
Wait, 14A5, everybody, 14A5. Okay, so we had that she's coming down the slope of the mountain, right? She's following the the group of people that she sent with all of the gifts, and of course then she's going to bump into David. So go ahead. Why does it say now? Why does? Go ahead.
Now, why does Scripture use the expression by the covert side of the mountain? It should have said simply from the mountain. Rabbi Bar Shmuel said, the unusual expression indicates that Abigail's meeting with David involved blood that comes from the hidden parts. That is, she took such blood and showed it to David, asking him to rule if it appeared as one of the 5 shades that render a woman tamai.
Tamei.
Tameh.
So tamei means ritually impure.
Right.
So the word that's in the Hebrew text is seter, right? Seter, the word here translated covert, hidden, right? Not seen. So the Gemara says she went down. There was a hidden element to this meeting, right? And of course, we just have the secrecy of it alluded to on the surface of the story. Naval doesn't know that she's going, and so on. But now the Gemara pushes it even further and goes, there's a really, really more intimate element here. And what it is that she shows David that body fluids from herself, from her intimate parts, from her secret parts. And she's asking David, this is stains from me. Is this does this constitute a menstrual emission or not? Now we had this, back to what Stuart was saying, this is an echo of the Esther story. We had it a few pages back, that this is what Esther did. She was a faithful Jewess. She always kept the laws of ritual purity. And the idea is if you're a nida, if you're a menstruating woman and you have your menstrual blood, then you're not allowed to engage in sexual relations, and you have to wait until the blood stops. But what if you just have some kind of stain that's not really blood? Then you have to ask a question. Does this qualify as menstrual blood or is it not? Am I allowed to have sexual relations with my husband or not? So these are intimate, private, hidden matters. So now the Talmud takes this huge imaginative leap and says, how we sort of a little bit started sensing that there's something erotic going on here. So we're going to push this now for all it's worth. And guess what? She is asking David whether she's actually really eligible for sexual intercourse or not. If she is menstruating, then she can't sleep with her husband, and of course, or with any other man. But if she's not menstruating, then she is available for intercourse. And of course, here the situation supposedly is that would mean with her husband, but why is she showing it to David? So if you look in the notes, we're going to skip it. This is part of David's transposition in the rabbinic period, where he is seen not simply as this brigand and this romantic type. He is a sage, and he knows all of the minutiae of religious law, and he would be he was a rabbi. He was a rabbi, and all of the people came to him. Is this chicken kosher? Am I ritually pure or impure? He was that. But of course, that's all fine and good. But here, what we have is a very shocking, unforeseen breach of there's a border crossing here, right? That's happening. To imagine that she's showing this to him. Let's hold it a little bit in abeyance, because the Talmud is going to unfold this whole story piece by piece. We're not done yet. Okay, so now the Gemara imagines further discussion by David and Abigail. He said to her,
should blood be shown at night? Since it is nighttime, I am not allowed to examine the blood.
Okay, so this is a real legalistic conversation now that you have to make judicial decisions in the daytime, not at night. Here we are in the dark of night. Why are you showing me this? So we've sort of gone off into the side, but now let's see what happens.
She responded to him, "If so, I will remind you of another law. Are capital cases tried at night? Certainly not. How then can you condemn my husband Naval to death at night?"
So she turns the tables and she says, "Oh, so you're such a stickler for legal propriety. You want to sentence my husband to death. It's the nighttime. So what do you think you're doing? What kind of tzaddik are you?" Right. So this is again one of these a little weird for us, right? But once or twice, I mean, I can think of at least one other example. The rabbis imagine women using women's laws as a way of challenging the honor and the sense of morality of the male judges who they were dependent on, right? They'll come with that first, and then they say, "Oh, but what about all this other stuff that you're doing?" The other example where this happens is the daughters of Tzlofchad. Daughters of Tzlofchad are imagined, according to one midrash, to bring up this kind of like nida, women's issue stuff, and then when Moses says, "Well, the halacha is," and then they go, "Oh, really? You're such a pious person. How come you're stealing our inheritance from us?" So there's this self put in the words of women, imagining that women are giving that kind of critique back to the men who have power over them, and saying, "Stop being such double standard kinds of people." So here, Abigail is imagined to do that same kind of semi-proto-feminist challenge by actually putting herself up front as a woman and saying, "Oh, you're very comfortable, telling me, you're mansplaining me, whether you can or you can't, deal with what I'm struggling with, but murdering somebody is fine." Right. So this is the kind of like, the pointed thrust that she's credited with here.
But there's an echo here of the Bathsheba story too.
We're going to get to that too.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So now she says to David, "So what do you think you're doing? How about a little consistency here? We're on 14b1. Wait.
David said to her,
now we're on 14b1.
"Your husband Naval is a traitor to the crown, and therefore it is not necessary to judge him in the manner other capital cases are judged." Abigail replied.
So his answer is, "I can do what I want at night. This is not a regular judicial proceeding. Regular judges can only convene a court in the daytime, but this is extrajudicial. This is the power that the king has to put down a rebellion, to put down anybody that's a traitor gets executed without having to go through the same legal rigmarole." Okay, we can look. There's a long note number 2, but let's get back to him in a second. To that later. First, let's get to the finish of this particular thing. Go ahead.
Abigail replied to him, "My husband's actions do not constitute a rebellion against the king, for Saul is still alive, and your eminence has not yet spread abroad." Impressed by Abigail's argument, David said to her, "Blessed be your reasoning, and blessed be you who has prevented me this day from coming to bloods."
Right, so that we had in our text, right? That David says, "Oh, you saved me from shedding blood," right? So thank you so much. You did that. In the text itself, you bought me off with the presents, and you were nice to me, so you sort of calmed me down. So now I don't have to go and kill your husband. Here, we get this extra halachic, back and forth, but it's also about David's standing, right? remember, Saul is still around. In fact, David is an outlaw. However, he has been already anointed to be the future king of Israel by Samuel. So this is the paradox, right? He is the future king, but right now there still is a king. And that's, part of the tragedy. Saul knows that he's supposed to be king, and Saul is desperately trying to, kill him before he can be. It's very Shakespearean, very much, the destiny is already written on the wall. Can you somehow defeat that prediction, and so on? So she's saying to him, you can't claim that you are the king that can just do whatever he wants, because you're not the king yet. You're not the king yet. So here's again a kind of a truth to power kind of statement, and a slap in the face a little bit to David, and then he wakes up from it. He takes it as oh, you know what? I have to admit, you're right. Let's look at note 2 for a second.
Certainly, David did not mean that a traitor need not stand trial. Rather, he was explaining to Abigail that an important rule of procedure is waived in cases of sedition. That is, in all other capital cases, a guilty verdict may not be handed down on the day court proceedings commenced. The case of the traitor, however, is the exception to this rule. He may be judged and sentenced to death all on the same day.
Right. In a regular capital case, the rule is that you have to go slow. You have to sleep on it. Because who knows, maybe somebody will think of another argument, maybe somebody will find some technicality, because we're not in a hurry to kill anybody. So the regular cases, when somebody is brought up and the danger is that he or she will be sentenced to death, they can't be executed in a one-day instant judgment. However, when it comes to a traitor, it's the opposite. With a traitor, you want to kill this traitor before anything further gets going. So you want to expedite this as much as possible. So therefore, if you can do it that same night. That's one interpretation. Keep going. Thus,
when Abigail asserted to David that capital cases may not be tried at night, she meant that they may not be concluded if the verdict is to be a guilty one until the morning following. Hence, she argued, David's condemnation of Nabal to death was invalidly rendered. David therefore responded that in cases of sedition against the crown, this procedural rule did not apply. See Tosafot, Rambam.
No, see Tosafot, period. Now, Rambam,
however, seems to maintain that a traitor is not accorded the right to a formal trial, but is judged by the king himself in an informal matter.
Etc., etc. All right, so this is a basic argument among the earlier authorities. The first part of our note assumes that even a traitor is entitled to legal procedures. The only thing is that we then do it as quickly as possible. Maimonides reads this text as a straightforward denial of the rights of a traitor to any due process. And that means you can have a targeted assassination. You can have and if somebody is determined by the king, by the ruler, to be, an opponent of the regime, then you can wipe them out. You don't have to convene a court hearing and so on and so forth. You just have, your quiet deliberation, in the privacy of your own, strategy room. Once you're convinced that this person is a security threat, you get them, right? So a basic distinction that's made here between Rambam and Tosfot and so on about things that we struggle with to this very moment, right? When we talk about security threats, how cautious do we have to be? How much do we really have to apply the rule of law as it applies in general situations to that kind of extreme situation? And of course, we have arguments back and forth, and we are always worried about the exploitation of security arguments going wrong, right? That we do something really hastily because we say it's a security threat, so we can't wait. And then we find out afterwards that if we only would have waited and actually really, delved in more to the facts of the matter, we would have, uncovered other kinds of evidence or other kinds of considerations, and huge mistakes wouldn't have happened. Okay, I have to let the dog out. Go right ahead. So so here we see it in this kind of like weird story that we have about these two people. It ends up actually touching on hugely difficult political and moral questions, as I say, that deal with this very hard world that we live in. I just saw the headline of the Times about these people that were there was a military strike, and 70 innocent people were killed in 2019, and then it was covered up because it's not good for security, and they were killed basically because of security questions, but it was all wrong in the end. These are the problems that we have. We've had this. Israel has it. America has it. Obama was castigated for authorizing drone assassinations and so on. Difficult questions. And here we have it in this little weirdo biblical story. Okay. So now we're going to close it back around to to what we had all the way at the beginning. Remember, we had the fact that she supposedly, and the intimacy was that she showed him her stains and asked him what for him to make a legal decision about it. So what's that all about? So now the Gemara asks.
David said that Abigail had saved him from bloods, implying two circumstances of
Right,
blood.
the word damim, which is blood, but that's, this is a rabbinic push. Just like we say chayim for life, which is plural. That's the usual Hebrew usage. So damim, shvichut damim, bloodshed, the spilling of blood. But we do have a singular for dam. We don't have a singular for life. We have dam, svardeya, kinim, right? When we do the 10 plagues, blood and frogs. So there is a singular. So why is the text saying damim in the plural? So a famous place where the rabbis notice this is when Cain kills Abel. God confronts Cain and says, "Where's your brother?" And he says famously, "Am I my brother's keeper? How do I know?" Right? So he denies that. And then God says, "What are you talking about? You can't deny this. Kol demei achicha tzoakim elai min ha'adama." The sound, the voice of the blood of your brother is screaming out to me from the earth. And you want to tell me that you don't know what's going on? So this is God, back to Cain. And the word there is demei, which means the bloods of, right? It doesn't say kol dam achicha. It says kol demei achicha, the bloods. So, the simplest idea is there's blood splattered all over the place. It's a terrible, terrible, gory scene. But the rabbis said, what does it mean, the bloods of your brother? It means not only his blood. When you killed him, you didn't just kill him, but let's go back to what we had with Hannah. You killed every generation that could have come from him. Right? All of the future blood, all of the future life that could have issued from your brother, you prevented that from ever happening. That's the sound that I hear, says God. So, so here we have again the Gemara asking, why does it say bloods? Why doesn't it just say blood? Go ahead.
Scripture records only one such circumstance, the narrowly averted bloodshed of Nabal. The Gemara answers, rather, Scripture teaches that Abigail revealed her leg, and when David saw it, he traveled with a burning desire for her 3
Parsas, 3
parsas.
parathangs. The whole long, he saw the light of her leg here, literally her thigh. She revealed her thigh, and he then giddy up. He was like on fire to go and meet her.
He then said to her, listen to me.
Listen
She
to me.
answered him.
Listen to me means a euphemism. It means sleep with me.
She answered him, this should not be a stumbling block for you.
Okay, so that's a verse that she says, and this is circling back. That's why she showed him the stains. She showed him the stains, saying, you know what, I think that this would not be a good idea because you don't really want to sleep with me tonight because I'm having my monthly way. So that's now have brought us back to the beginning part, but it all now closes in and really makes totally explicit the erotic energies that are going on here. And we have this kind of like semi-seduction, it sounds like, right? And then pulling up short, right? And saying, no, but watch out. And then David says, you know what? You have saved me from 2 bloods, right? From not spilling the blood of your husband and also not sleeping with you when you are in this bloody state. Okay, so this is how we understand it now. David.
The Gemara asks and answers, this is all really a medrash of the Gemara and not explicit in the book of Samuel, correct?
Correct. That's why I read what's in the book of Samuel. What's in the book of Samuel, though, that's what I was trying to say, is there's enough of a kernel of something in there. There's some kind of, frisson. There's some kind of sparks that are flying between Abigail and David. Something is being said and not said at the same time. And what the Gemara is doing here is just really sort of like blowing it up. If it's in the text in a kind of a microscopic way, we now have it blown up 1,000, 10,000 times, so now we can actually see the erotic energies being played with back and forth, right? So yeah, okay, but now we have some problems. We have some problems to deal with, because this idea, it's a little shocking, right? She revealed her thigh to him, right? So she's teasing him. She's trying to seduce him, and then she stops him in his tracks. So she's like sort of playing with him, torturing him a little bit because he's really, all turned on. And she supposedly did this. What kind of manipulator is she? So let's look at the notes. Let's look at 5.
Stuart.
Sorry. Certainly she did not deliberately reveal herself to David, for Abigail was a prophetess and a righteous woman. Rather, she uncovered her leg for an instant in a secluded place for whatever personal reason. However, David chanced by at that particular moment and saw her. He was immediately filled with desire for her, and that desire stayed with him as he covered the 3 parsa distance separating them, as explained by Agahot Yavetz.
Yavetz. So, okay. So in other words, this is now subsequent layers of thinking through this story, and the shocking idea that she's being so brazen is unacceptable to a lot of readers. Wait a second, this is all part of a long text which we haven't actually gotten to the full punchline, where she's proven to be a prophetess. So she's a prophetess and she's also a harlot. I mean, she's also like, this brazen woman. Can't be. So what we now say is it was an accident. She didn't consciously, purposely reveal herself to him, but she was revealed and he saw it. Where do we have a similar situation? Bathsheba, right? So we're going to get to that actually in the next paragraph. Bathsheba, David sees her accidentally bathing, in the privacy of her home, and he catches a glimpse of her, and then he's all, aroused. So here the same thing. So according to this reading, she didn't mean it. She wasn't trying to manipulate him. But what happened was that then she had to deal with the fact that she's got this guy sexually harassing her, right? He's coming over to her and pushing himself on her and saying, listen to me, listen to my words, listen to my proposition. I'm making you a proposition you can't refuse, right? So it's still, it puts David back, in a light that we've seen again and again, but it saves her honor, right? It saves her propriety. Okay, so all right, now let's look at number 8, note number 8. Oh wait, let's look at 7. Let's look at 7.
A euphemism for have relations with me. However,
Right. Listen to me. So have sex with me, right? But now we've got a problem. Go ahead. However,
since Abigail was a married woman, how could David even consider having relations with her?
Right, she's Naval's wife. So what is David doing here? Right, go ahead.
And to Ein Yaakov answers that since David intended to execute Naval first, he never entertained thoughts of adultery.
Right, so he was a very pious man, and first he was going to kill Naval and then sleep with her. So that answers that problem, right? So we don't have to worry about it. He's still a completely innocent, good man. All right, now let's read 8.
Thus, the 2 bloods from which Abigail saved David were 1, the murder of Nabal, and 2, having relations with her while she was nidah, a menstruant, which is forbidden by Torah law.
Right, and now we have to backtrack again. Wait a second, but brackets.
Okay, brackets. This is not to say that David proposed a liaison with her knowing that she was a nidah. Rather, after he saw her exposing her leg from afar, her exposed leg from afar, he hastened to her and made his request. It was at this point Abigail showed him a specimen of her blood and asked if she was menstrually tameh, thereby saving David from committing one sin involving blood. His response that a nocturnal examination of the specimen was invalid provided her an opening to question also the propriety of his adjudicating Naval's case at night, and that prevented him from committing the second sin involving blood.
Right. So that's how we have to sort of like rearrange all of the pieces of this textual puzzle. And this is how we can finally sort of a little bit exonerate everybody from, too egregious, a violation of our code of morals and religious propriety. So it means then flipping around, the part that we had at the beginning, it finally makes sense now, right? The business about her showing the blood stuff. But it also just highlights when people are impassioned, right? They're not going to just stop on a dime, right? There's going to be a struggle. There's going to be an attempt to try to find an excuse, try to find a loophole, try to find a way to get away with something, to try to find a way to fulfill one's desires. So that's part of how we're in the garb of these quasi-legal, arguments between Naval and David. We're getting, also a kind of a psychological, what can I say? you know, a typical case of how people, you know, try for what they want. So now let's go the last paragraph, which is finally going to be the punchline for how Abigail is proven to be a prophet. Because so far we haven't proven anything that shows that she's a prophet. We've proven that she's a pretty savvy person. We're not quite sure how innocent she is or how you know, proper she is, but she's definitely a strong-willed person, and and you know, and she's very she's got a lot of agency, so to speak. But we haven't proven that she's a prophet. So how do we prove that she's a prophet? Here it comes. The Gemara continues.
The Gemara
Oh, wait.
continues.
And
Yeah.
so this concludes.
Exclusionary.
No, wait. Wait, so I'm sorry. We skipped. The Gemara
Right.
finds evidence.
Finds evidence of Abigail's prophetic gift in the verse just cited.
Right, this is the bottom of 14b1 left-hand column.
The exclusionary this intimates that there will be another occasion when David will stumble. And what was that? The episode of Bathsheba. And in the end, it was that way. This concludes the proof that Abigail was a prophetess, for she was able to foretell that David would again stumble in a similar way.
Right, so now you have to read what Abigail says at the end is, I saved you this time, but I can see what kind of person you are. And guess what? You're not going to be so lucky next time. You're not going to have an Abigail to figure out how to actually stop you in your tracks. You're a guy with passion. You're a guy who wants what you want, and you're going to stumble another time. But this time, it's not going to be on my watch. You're not going to stumble this time with me. Sylvia.
This reminds me very much of the times that we're living in now.
Mm,
The Me Too world,
absolutely.
where the question is, you know, the role of women in that.
Right. So say more with the role of women in what ways?
Pointing out women having the power to refute the energies of men.
Right. So that's one part of it, right? So, you know, there are
Power.
This is a very painful, you know, kind of, you know, issue to deal with. And power, like you say, is so part of this. So when the power differential is really huge, how much can you expect the woman to be able to defend herself? You know, and here Abigail is able somehow, and she's a very wealthy woman. She's a married woman. She's got a lot of resources behind her. So it's not quite, you know, as one-sided as too many of the cases have been in the Me Too stories that we find out where you know, you have somebody looking for a job, you've got somebody who, you know, who needs the other person's support or approval only, and really can't get away with it. But what you also, I thought maybe what you were bringing up is, the other question is,
Guile.
what?
Sorry.
The other question is the real difficult question of speaking out.
That's what I was
Right?
saying.
Not just defending yourself at the moment, you know, kick the guy in the balls and run out of the room.
Bringing it to the public.
But can you bring it to the public? What does that do? You know, how safe is that for you to do that? Would that have helped somebody else? You know, women have said, you know, if I would have come out with this 10 years ago, maybe it would, you know, this monster wouldn't have, you know, been able to have do the crimes that he did after me. But of course, it's you know, it's very hard for anybody to judge anybody else, because again, the power differentials are just awful.
And
Yeah.
then the irony of the situation is that David is upheld in history, certainly in Jewish history, as a great hero. And yet he certainly meets every one of many criteria that we have today of somebody that we cannot admire.
Right. So that's where, well, he's a complicated guy, and we're not going to, you know, deal with him, you know, fully today. But Nathan, the prophet, does call him out on the Bathsheba story. And he says, you are disgusting. You're the man. You have done something terrible. And the one thing that we have there, and of course that's also part of our struggles these days, is that we have the report that David is contrite, that David admits that he was wrong and does tshuva. And that's a major question, right? Today, these monsters or these people that have been so smug about themselves and have done whatever they've done over years and years, how capable is a person like that of actually changing?
But on the other hand, David, you can't bring someone back to life.
Right, right.
And all the contriteness in the world doesn't ever bring anybody back to life.
That's true, but that doesn't take the contriteness away.
No.
We have people, unfortunately, who have committed crimes, in our jails today, and they change. They,
No
and
doubt
have killed people. They've killed people, and then they've changed. And then our question then becomes, what do we do with that? So I'm just making it more complicated. I'm not trying to exonerate anybody, but what I am saying is that contrition is not to be just swept away like that.
You bear his name.
I bear his name. The name means beloved.
Right.
And he had so much going for him, and part of what he had going for him was that people just couldn't resist him. He was irresistible.
And maybe
not like me, but that's the name.
No, but maybe it just says that, the human being is so complicated and so that everybody is full of many different pieces.
Right, absolutely. And we didn't actually finish the last, and that's the way it was. So we're going to have to stop there, right there. We still have another little paragraph that we have to read, but we're not going to do that today. We'll finish it up next time, I hope, and continue from there. Okay, see everybody.
Thank you.
We can.
Dr.
Okay.
Bob.